All right, tonight we're in Matthew chapter 12. Now, we're just going from one thing to another. There's no way to go back to review. They're not connected. It's one incident happens, then Jesus moves on, and another incident happens, and another incident happens. And so you go ahead and you see all of these things that happen, and then when you put them all together, what is the purpose of the book? What is it supposed to have taught us? That Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's the conclusion that we're supposed to have. So that's the evidence that we have. See, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, something like now this famous Scott Peterson case that is coming up. We see back and forth all of the time, and nobody has saw him. Nobody has seen anybody who killed that young lady, and yet they're going to have a trial. And they're going to have a trial, and one party is going to say, he's the guilty party. Now, for them to prove he's the guilty party, what do they have to do? What? Evidence. What kind of evidence? How much evidence? They have to have a picture of him? No, they don't have to. They don't have to see it, but they have to have circumstantial evidence. And how much? There's a legal terminology of which, if I tell you what it is, I would get it wrong because I don't know. But it's what? It's beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the point. They have to present enough evidence so that people say, okay, here and here and here and here. That I'm still not sure. Sure looks like he is, but here and here and here, looking more all the time. Here, here, here. How many things they have to bring up? Until it's beyond a reasonable doubt. See, that's what it is. So you're going to have to bring in a lot of things so that a jury would say, look, when you look at all this evidence, the only conclusion that a sensible person can come to is he's guilty. Now, let's take that over, transfer it to Jesus. Here is the evidence. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is giving us the evidence. And they're trying to prove Jesus is guilty. Guilty of what? Of being the Son of God. He is the Christ. He is the Son of God. When you look at all the evidence, He is the one. The Old Testament has given us all of these prophecies. The Jews have been looking for the Messiah, the Son of God. They've been looking for Him. They've been analyzing the situation. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John says, here's your evidence. Read your evidence. And when you read the evidence, then you must come to the conclusion that Jesus is the one that they're talking about. So that's the reason we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John written the way that it is. In other words, here's what he did, here's what he did, here's what he did, here's what he said, here's how he handled this situation, here's what he did, here's what he did, here's what he did. Here's a miracle he performed. He performed them privately. He performed them publicly. He performed them in the middle of people. He performed them as he was walking along, and there was a big crowd around him, and a woman comes up and touches him. He met a funeral procession going to bury an individual. He raised the individual from the dead. These things were not planned out. It's not something that you could plant, that you could put certain people in. It just in every conceivable situation, he always comes up. He's the one. And it started back before he was ever born. It started back to where he had the right mom and dad, didn't he? Was genealogy an important thing? Then he was born in the right city. Was that an important thing? How big a city was that city he was born in? Just a little old thing. Did he live in that city? No. He lived on the other end of the nation. But here it is. Certain events happened. His mom and dad end up down there from the right tribes, in the right city. He was born. Then they had to flee out. They had to go to Egypt. Isn't that a coincidence? Then they came back. They were going to settle down in Judea when he was a little boy. But then they heard about Archelaus. They said, well, we got to go back up to Nazareth. Isn't that a coincidence? Because the Christ was going to be called a Nazarene. And so he was raised up there. He wasn't born up there, but he was raised up there. Isn't that a coincidence? Now, as you look at all of these things, just one upon the other, you find all of these things happening before he ever opened his mouth. And so now then, we're in his teaching. And we're listening to him. We're watching him. We're seeing what he has to do as he's dealing with people. And we're going to look at the things he does. Then we're going to look at how he handles people, how he never makes a mistake, how he answers questions. And so we see all of these things. And finally, in a little while, a person has to say, look, you don't need any more evidence. See? It's all there. And really, that's what John said as he closed his book. He said, now, if I told you everything he did, the world wouldn't, he said, I suppose, hold it. But I've told you these things that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ. See? So that's what we're in. So each one of these things is put in here to give us a little slice of his life. Now, the way you and I have to study them is, we have to take them just a slice at a time. We have to take one event, talk about it, then take another event, talk about it. Now, as we're doing this, we can learn a whole lot. We can learn a lot about how to handle people, how to answer questions. We can learn about Jesus if we're going to follow in his footsteps. We can learn a whole lot. But when everything is said and done, what's the purpose? See, what's the purpose of the book? It's to put it all together and come to that conclusion. And so, now, in verse 12, in chapter 12, at that season, Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the grain fields, and his disciples were hungry and began to pluck ears and eat. Let's stop right there. How many times have you taken 12 men and walked through grain fields? What would happen to you if you took 12 men and walked through some farmer's grain field? You're going to get shot at, aren't you? In other words, you just don't do that. That would be a horrible thing to do. You would be tearing up his livelihood, be losing lots of money. And here it is, they're walking through the grain fields. So now let's try to put this in proper perspective. They're not walking through grain fields the way you and I think about grain fields today. We think about roads, you know, you're driving on, and then you get out and you jump over the fence and you walk through a grain field. Well, about everywhere they went, they walked through grain fields because they didn't have the 4-lane highways that we have. They had pathways. Most of them would be 6 feet wide, and they would walk from one city to another city. They were wide enough to where a human and a donkey could meet each other. Just like today, 2 cars can meet each other on our roadways. But these are walkways. Now, these walkways went through the countryside. Over on this side of the road, one farmer would own this. Over on this side of the road, a farmer would own this. It's what we call pathways, what we call pathways today. It's what we'd call a bicycle trail. It's kind of like a bicycle trail that goes out. Now, every farmer had a command from Moses about his grain field. When he went out to harvest his grain field, do you remember what Moses said he had to do to the grain next to this pathway, this roadway? He had to leave it. He couldn't harvest it. He had to leave it. Why did he have to leave it? For the passerbys, for the poor people, for the people who was traveling, and they were hungry. They didn't have a Denny's on every corner. And so they had to leave the grain so that people could reach over and take some grain and eat the grain. This was the Jewish system, see? This is the way that they ate. This is a normal thing that they did in that culture. Now, you and I don't do that today. No. I mean, you say, well, why would somebody be walking through a grain field? Why would they be reaching over and eating some grain? Well, if I told you there's 12 men, and they're taking a trip from here to Wisconsin. And they stopped at a Denny's restaurant. And they went in and got some scrambled eggs. Nobody gets shook up, would you? You'd say, well, that's the normal lifestyle. This is the normal lifestyle. That's what I want us to see. And this was not written to Americans in America. It was written in another culture. So they're walking down the road. It's just as normal as it can be. They're hungry. The way that they eat is the way everybody else eats. Reach over, take some grain, be like taking wheat, rubbing it there, blowing the chaff out, throwing it in your mouth, and eating it. So what is happening is a very normal activity. See, it's something that thousands of people did every day that they walked down the roadways. So he's walking through this grain field. His disciples were hungry and began to pluck and to eat the ears. But the Pharisees, when they saw it, said unto him, Behold, thy disciples do that which is not lawful to do upon the Sabbath. Now, these Pharisees are charging Jesus with letting his disciples break the Sabbath. Now, what does the Sabbath law say? There was a law concerning the Sabbath. What was it? Remember the Sabbath, keep it holy. On the Sabbath thou shalt do no work. So you're not supposed to work. So you're supposed to rest on the Sabbath day. Now, the Jews had hundreds of laws. I've read from another Jew who says in the Talmud there are 1,600 different laws that the Jews have made up to show how to keep the Sabbath day. In other words, if you do this, if you don't do this, or if you do this, you break the Sabbath day in there. So they said you can't do certain things. Now, one of them was that you can't reach over and eat the grain on the Sabbath day. You can't pick it off, because if you pick it off, that's harvesting grain. First of all, that's harvesting grain. What would happen if a farmer went out in the field on the Sabbath day and started harvesting his grain on the Sabbath day? Would that be legal? No, that would be a sin. Well, that's what these guys are doing. They're harvesting the grain, according to the Pharisees. Now, is there a difference? Can anybody in here see a difference between taking a bite of food and harvesting grain? But they said, no, you can't do this. Now, there's some other things that were bad about that, too. According to the Jewish man-made law, if you reach over and you pull this out, you're working. That's sin. Then as you pull off this grain, what's the chances of you dropping a few grains? Pretty good. Now you're planting seed. You're not only harvesting grain, but you're planting the seed. See? And if it falls on the roadway and a bird comes along and picks it up and eats it, flies over there and drops it somewhere in another field, you're planting grain. So now you're guilty of two grievous sins. Now all of this is according to Jewish man-made law. See? So this is what they're charging him with. Yeah. Yeah, on the Sabbath they were not supposed to go out and pick up any manna. Yeah.
How would this be different picking up manna?
God told them, don't you pick up manna on the Sabbath. He said on Friday you pick up twice the amount that you need, and you're not to pick any up on there. On here, God is not feeding them manna, and they're permitted to eat this. See? So go ahead.
I'm just wondering how it is from going out picking up manna and eating it and going out picking up grain.
Well, even if I couldn't, see, I can explain a big difference in there, but even if I couldn't, there is a difference. One, God said specifically don't do, see, on this. Now, when he said, don't pick up manna, don't go out and gather the manna, this was a gathering program. It's not an eating program. It's a harvesting program of where you go out and you actually do this on Friday. Then you come in, and what do you do with the manna on the Sabbath day? What do you do with it? How you eat it? You pick it up, don't you? You pick it up or something and you put it in your mouth and you eat it. That's what they were doing with the grain. They weren't harvesting the grain, you see. Had they been harvesting it, it would have been wrong. They weren't harvesting it. All they did just pick it up, put it in their mouth, see. And so it was a meal, that's what it is. And eating a meal was not a sin, see. But according to their law, they had made it that. So now then they're charging him with this. Now, let's look at what Jesus said. Now get ready for a problem. I'm going to give you a problem here. One I don't know the answer to, and I expect you to come up with it in here. And we'll see what it is in there in just a moment. So listen to it closely. So now then, he said, behold, thy disciples do that which is not lawful to do on the Sabbath. Now, they're charging him with his disciples doing something that's not lawful. Before we go any farther, let me ask you, is that charge true or false? That charge is false. Suppose Jesus had said, well, yeah, I agree with you, that was not lawful, but I told him to do it anyway. What would that have meant about Jesus? He was endorsing something that was unlawful, see? And so, but I want you to notice, he didn't come back and say, oh, you made a mistake. It is lawful. He didn't start arguing on that basis. He now is going to argue with them on another basis. And here's the basis he's going to argue with them on. He said unto them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry? And they that were with him, how he entered into the house of God and ate the showbread, which it was not lawful for him to eat, neither for him that were with him, but only for the priest? Now, chew on that one. Try to put yourself in their shoes and in the shoes of Jesus and see what he said. They said, you're letting your disciples do something that's not lawful. Jesus answered and said, haven't you read about David? How he went into the temple and ate the showbread? And according to the law of Moses, who was supposed to eat the showbread? Only the priest. And David went in and he ate the showbread, which was not lawful. Have you read that? Now let's go to the next. What's your conclusion right now? What did Jesus say? How did he answer him? He answered him with a question. But what does it sound like the question is? Have you ever noticed, what was it? I was reading on, I was listening to the news today, and I forget what it was. Somebody was saying, according to the law, you can't do this. And the law is very plain on it. But the person then would say, yeah, but what about this? Oh, I know what it was. Yeah, I was sitting there before I came and watching O'Reilly, and a guy was saying that it's good to smoke dope, to take dope, drink alcohol, and mind-altering drugs are good for you. And so they were in a discussion on this thing. And so O'Reilly said, now, let's take this dope. And here it is, you say it's good now to alter your mind so that you can't think clearly. He said, what about alcohol? What about alcohol? Look at all the people that drink alcohol. And O'Reilly said, look, there are 27 million alcoholics in America causing automobile accidents and so forth, and they're wrong when they do that. But you're trying to say it's right and good to smoke dope, alter your mind, and I'm saying it's wrong. Justify smoking dope. Well, what about the alcoholics? Trying to justify it with somebody else, see? And so people do this all the time. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but what about? And then they throw it off on someone else. Now, as you read this, your first impression is that's what Jesus did. That they said, you are permitting your disciples to eat, which is not lawful. And he said, well, haven't you read where David ate something that wasn't lawful? So our conclusion is, now Jesus didn't say this, but what is your conclusion? since David did it, then I can do it. See, that, I mean, that's the way that we would view this in here. Now, he just leaves it there at that realm. Now, one thing about it, they understood some things that you and I don't understand. Now, why could I say that? The people on the scene could see things, understand things that you and I can't understand in this situation. When you're in the situation of discussion, are there other things that you use to communicate other than just cold, hard words? When you say certain things, the way you say them, the way you look, the speed of your voice, so forth and so on, tells you a lot of things, you see, that's in there. And we don't get that. All we get are the words that are there. So there's some things that we don't get out of this that is here. Now, as you look at this, first of all, if he was saying, now these Jews are trying to prove he was wrong. And they said, now, you sinned, you did that which is unlawful. And Jesus said, well, yeah, I did, but David did that which was unlawful. What would those Jews have done who wanted to totally destroy this man who claimed to be the Christ? What would they have done right on the spot? Don't you think they had sense enough to know that? So you confess you sinned then. You confess David sinned, you confess you sinned, and you claim to be the Christ, and you sinned? See? They didn't do that. Now, these aren't fools. These are the scholars of the day. They didn't do that because they were caught. They were caught. They saw something in there, and here I think is what they must have seen. These people had justified David in doing what David did. Now, David and his men were out running away from Saul, and they were hungry. David went up to the priest, to the tent of meeting, and said, give us some bread in here because we're hungry. And so the priest, he gave them the bread, and they took it and went on their way. Now, that was unlawful. See, that was unlawful. But the Pharisees justified David in doing it. See, they justified David in doing it. They justified him, and they claimed that in some way, we don't know how they justified him, but I do know that they made claims that how often did you change the bread? Every 7 days. Every Sabbath day you'd change the bread. And then the priest was supposed to eat the bread. But the bread would be a week old when they ate it. When they took it off to eat it. Then, if they let it set for a little while, it gets older and older. And the Jews were saying it generally wasn't eaten, not very much of it, consumed by the priest. I'm guessing. I don't know about this. I'm guessing they said somehow or another. So what David did is he took the leftover parts. See, he took this. He took the parts and started out. I don't know. I'm just giving you, had I been a Pharisee, that's about the only argument I could think of. Now, they weren't about to accuse David of sin. They accepted that. Now, Jesus then is asking them this. He said, fellas, you've come over here and you've accused me and my disciples of sinning when we reached over and we ate this grape. What do you do when you read about David and you justify him? See, you uphold him. He went and got the bread out of the temple or out of the tent of meeting, and he ate that bread which was not lawful. Jesus said it wasn't lawful, which wasn't lawful, but you justify it. Want to talk about it anymore? Now, he didn't put in there, do you want to talk about it anymore? I'm trying to show you They had ways of saying things. We have ways of saying things. See, if I knew that Roger was a big hypocrite and justifying David for something that David did that was wrong, then he comes up and he makes a big deal out of me of something that is not wrong. I know I got me a hypocrite on my hands, don't I? See, I know it. So I just might turn around and say, Roger, you say this is wrong. What about David, the guy that you justified? You want to talk about that? It's your time to talk. What would Roger say? Let's go to the next subject. I think that's what is happening here. See, I think that's what is happening. And we don't have enough of the story to be able to do it. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? And I'm taking a little time to hear, because this is something that's always argued about. Now, the other argument, the other side is this, that what Jesus is saying is that under the circumstances, David went in and he took bread that was not lawful to eat, and he ate the unlawful bread, and it was okay. It was okay for him to eat unlawful bread if he was hungry. Therefore, it's okay for my disciples to eat this if they're hungry. And a statement that he makes on down here kind of substantiates that, verse 7. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. So they say, you see, David, God wanted mercy upon David and his men when they were hungry, rather than being technically bound to the law. Okay. Those arguments go back and forth. Arguments go back and forth. Now, the problem that you come up with is in the teachings of Jesus, does he ever, or the Apostle Paul, ever uphold the breaking of a direct law of God? See, he doesn't do that. Now, there are times when there are things that come in conflict and you have to make a decision. For instance, what I've given you before, that Sunday morning you're coming into services and you run into an accident and a little girl laying over there on the side of the road bleeding. But if you pick her up and rush her to the hospital, you're going to miss services. So what should you do? Come to services and leave her out there? Or pick her up, take her to the hospital, and then come to services? Which is the most important? Showing mercy or coming to services? See? We'd all understand. No, in that case where there's conflict, then it's coming to the services here. Now, there may be another thing that we don't know, is how bad David and his men were. If they were at the point of starvation, if they were at the point of death, I could see where that would hold water, you see. But we don't get that picture, so I don't know. So there's your two sides. The story is short. Don't get enough information. So I'll throw it out to you. You give me the right answer. Mitch has got it.
No, I'm still curious about verse 8. That's what the important one, maybe. All of this
We haven't got to verse 8 yet. I need to answer the other, and then I'll explain verse 8.
Well, see, I don't think
You got to get the other first.
I think you got to take 1 through 8 all together.
Oh,
And any answer you give got to fill all 8 verses, not just refer to it here or there.
oh, well, yeah, we got to take all 8, but I'd sure like to know what he's talking about up there before we get to 8. In other words, David. Is he upholding David or not? See? Do you see the point? That's all that I'm trying to get at.
He said that David broke the law.
Yeah, he said it's not lawful.
And he says that David wouldn't have condemned the guiltless. And the people they condemned was him and the disciples. And Jesus said they were guiltless, so they must not have
So,
breaking the law.
yeah, so they weren't breaking the law. So you got David was, they weren't. So it fits my first explanation. You see, when I give it, when he says that way. And so Jesus is not, Jesus, the way I understand it is, he's not saying David is justified for breaking the law. He's not saying And he's also not saying that he and his disciples broke the law. What he's saying is exactly the opposite. Jesus says David did break the law. It was not lawful. But in verse 7 there, he said, but if you know what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. Now, who is it the disciples were condemning? Were they condemning the Pharisees? Were they condemning David, or were they condemning Jesus? They were condemning him. You wouldn't have condemned us had you learned, had you known this lesson. See? And that is that God desires mercy and not sacrifice. God has made laws to show in His mercy that people going along the roadside can do exactly what we're doing. Right? They can do exactly what we're doing. If you'd understood that, we're not harvesting grain, then you wouldn't have any problem. Now, let's look at verse 5. Here's another statement that he makes. This is the other argument. Now, he gets through with that argument. What I really see him saying is, you people will take David, and even though everybody agrees, and I am saying it, here it is Jesus saying, I'm saying he was guilty. But you will justify him even when he's guilty. See, in doing that. But you won't justify us. And you say, even if we were guilty, according to your philosophy, what should you do? Well, even if we were guilty, the way you're arguing, you should justify us. They don't have a leg to stand on. He just leaves them. Then he gives them another argument. Or, have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath day the priest in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? Now, what he means by profane is the opposite of sacred. Profane means that which is common. The idea here is that you go out, and what can you do 6 days of the week as far as labor is concerned? Anything you want to do. Common labor. That's profane work. So don't think of profane as meaning cursing and that. It means common. So now, the priest on the Sabbath day do common labor. What do the priest have to do on the Sabbath day? Sabbath day comes, what do they have to do? They have to do the same thing they did on Friday, on Thursday. They have to go in. And only this time they have to take the bread off. They have to make the new bread. They have to put the bread on. They're busy making bread. They have to take care of the altar. They have to put oil in the lamp. They have to take care of the temple. They have to do the same thing on the Sabbath day that they do the other 6 days of the week. They have to work, common work. And yet, they're guiltless. He kind of leaves that for you to chew on. Now, what can you learn from that? If the priests are expected to do that on the Sabbath day, and they're living under a law that says, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy and don't labor on the Sabbath day, what do you know, don't labor, what do you know that means? Or what do you know that doesn't mean?
Would it mean like just work for profit?
Well, sure.
Work to put money in your pocket?
Well, sure, it's to work for your benefit. See, it's not showing mercy to somebody. It's not doing the things that God tells you to do. If you happen to be a priest and you happen to have a job that God happens to say that you have to do on the Sabbath day, you go ahead and do it. Now, we're building up to a situation here. One Mitch asked just a minute ago. We're building up to a situation about the Sabbath. The Sabbath, see? And we're going to learn the truth. What he's trying to show them there is the truth about the Sabbath. And so then, he throws that out. Now, these people have to wrestle with that. Huh. Well, we certainly can't say that all labor is wrong, because the priest did. Then he says, but I say unto you that one greater than the temple is here. Now, boy, that is a declaration to his enemies. Who is he talking about? Who's the only person he could be talking about? Self. When the priest under the old law, when they're serving the temple, everybody agrees that the priest can prepare the food and do this. And I'm here to tell you that one greater than the temple itself, than the whole temple, one greater than the temple is here. Now he's throwing down the gauntlet. Now he's starting to throw down words that's going to drive the Pharisees crazy. Now, up to this time, he hasn't said too many things that would just drive them into a frenzy. But this battle between Christ and the Pharisees is going to continue to heat up. Now then, here for the first time, well, not for the first time, how would I put it? The first time that comes to my mind is the first sermon that he preached at Nazareth. You remember he got up, he didn't preach a sermon, but he got up and he read that scripture in Isaiah about the Christ. He closed the book, gave it back, and he sat down and he said, this day, that scripture has been fulfilled in your ears. Wow. What does that mean? I am the one that fulfilled that scripture. Boy, that got him upset. Now then, he's making a claim. He's greater than the temple itself. And so you uphold them. Then if I'm here, then we do that. Then he goes ahead and he says, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. So he makes the claim that he is the Lord of the Sabbath. How can he be the Lord of the Sabbath? How could Jesus be the Lord of the Sabbath? What does Lord mean? Ruler, the master, the controller. And so he ends up and he says, and besides, I am in control of the Sabbath. Now he didn't say this, but you and I know from other things, who created the whole world? God through Christ. So he created the whole world. Who made the Sabbath law? God gave it down there. It's God through Christ. Christ is involved in all of this. See? He's deity. He said, now I want you to understand, today you're dealing with somebody that is greater than the temple. You're dealing with somebody who is actually in control of the Sabbath. I'm here to tell you, I know what it means to work on the Sabbath. I understand it. I can tell you what's right. I can tell you what's wrong. I can argue you down. I can show you don't know what you're talking about, because the reason is I made it start with. I made the laws concerning it. I am in control of it. I'm not breaking it. I know what it takes. So, as I said, he puts these arguments together. Bang, bang, bang. They come up to him, and they give him this argument. Now, he turns around, and he gives them an argument that you can read in Proverbs 26, down about verse 4, I think it is. There's a statement there that I think Jesus is doing right here. He makes a statement, and he says, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. What does that mean? Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. Well, if a fool bounces in here, and the fool is going to try to show that I'm wrong, and he's a fool. Now, here he's going to come in, and he's going to give a foolish argument, a stupid argument. Now, how can I answer that fool to keep him from thinking he's really a wise guy? If I say, look, you're a fool. Oh, yeah, sure I'm a fool. You can't answer me, can you? Well, look, the argument is so dumb I just can't answer it. Yeah, sure. Uh-huh. Now, how wise does a fool think he is? Yeah, really smart. See, you know how I know that? Because I'm one. Okay, a fool will really think they're really smart. Now, how do you puncture a hole in it? How do you get to a fool? Not an honest man. An honest man comes up to me and gives me an argument. I can give him this. Oh, okay. But how do I puncture a hole in a fool? How can I hit him the hardest he can possibly be hit? Is what? No, I'm going to answer him. Is answering according to the same logic he just got through giving me. Okay? Answer according to the same logic he just got through giving me. Okay? In other words, he comes up and he gives me an argument, and it's a foolish argument. Well, if I just turn around and throw this same type of foolish argument back at him, then you can see, oh, this is kind of what O'Reilly did tonight when this guy comes on, prances on there. He's written a book. He wants to get rich. It's good to smoke dope. See? Go for it. And then Riley hits him. What about drunkenness? Well, yeah, he said, that's it. Alcohol. Alcohol is a mind-altering drug. Oh, I'm so smart. You know, yeah, and we all say that that's fine. And oh, no. No. Don't you know they're the same? Don't you know that alcohol does the same thing to a mind that dope does? They're both wrong. Well, you can't answer that. Now, this is what the proverb says. Answer a fool according to his folly. Just throw it back. According to your logic, then this is what it is. And lest he's wise in his own conceit. It'll bust his prideful balloon. Now, these people came in. How wise are the Pharisees? Oh boy, see. Now, you let your disciples eat that out there and violate the Sabbath law. Now, how's Jesus going to answer a fool according to his folly? Well, you guys justify David when he obviously broke the law. You justify him. I don't need to say more. It's your turn to talk. What's the fool going to say? Nothing. Let's change the subject. See? So, he answered fool according to his folly. Now, another thing, the very next verse, by the way, says, don't answer a fool according to his folly. And you know then how that finishes up? Lest you be likened to him. In other words, if he comes in and he starts giving me all these stupid arguments, I can answer him with a stupid argument to pop his balloon. But don't crawl down to his level and start giving a bunch of stupid arguments, because now we got one stupid guy arguing with another stupid guy, and we got two fools just alike, see? And so the proverb tells, balance it out. So Jesus said, look, according to your own logic, your own foolishness, you'll have to admit we didn't sin. Another thing, explain the priest to us. There is such a thing as working on the Sabbath day. And you agree that the priest can do it. And now don't you forget, I'm greater than the whole temple, see? And then another thing, I am Lord of the Sabbath. Now, this isn't going to convince them. This is going to shut them up, but they're going to come back in just a minute.
Could it be when saying is that I gave the priest the authority to do stuff on the Sabbath, and I'm much greater than the temple, so today I can give them the authority to pluck grain on the Sabbath because I am Lord of the Sabbath?
No, I think in essence that's what he's saying.
So it could be that if you and I would have plucked grain, we would have been in error, but Jesus told us we could pluck some grain, and we could pluck some grain.
Oh, well, no, I don't think that that's the thing that he's talking about. No, I don't think he's saying, I don't think Jesus is saying, look, I'm Lord of the Sabbath, so I can change the laws anytime I want to. See, it's okay here, but it's not okay here. What he's saying is, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. I made the Sabbath. I know what the Sabbath was made for. I know what the laws say. I know what you're to do in the laws, and this is okay. See, so I don't think he's saying, I'm Lord of the Sabbath, so I can say you're wrong and you're right, see, in doing the same thing. So that's where I'd say, no, I don't think so. I know that doesn't answer your question. I can tell by the frown on your face. You have the same kind of frown I have when you don't answer my question. Okay. Any questions on this? Because our time is up. But I spent a lot of time on it tonight because it's a question that you'll be hit with many times. And when I'm hit with it, I'll just plainly tell people I don't have all the answers on this, but here's what I understand, here's what I see, and you kind of have to take a long view and explain it in this way rather than just give a short view and say, well, it means this or this. It's one of those things. Okay. Oh, Dave?
Well, that's his point. Would there be different words for that word, possibly? Do you know?
Would there be different words for work?
Yeah, in other words, a word for income?
No. No, it's same. It's the same word. Yeah. Yeah. It's just like I asked, did you go to work today? And if you didn't go to work down there today and you stayed home and you put in a new light bulb or something, you'd say, no, I didn't go to work. See? I said, well, did you do any work? Well, yeah, I did some work around the house, but I didn't go to work. See? And so they use it the same way we use it, like that. Okay, class dismissed.